I'm Nicholas, and I'll be helping to host and moderate this panel of distinguished and exciting hot startups over here. Before I start, just to let you know that you can tweet in your questions to the hashtag. In case you do not know what the hashtag is, Startup Asia hashtag, I'll try my best to get your questions answered, especially if you have burning ones. If you tweet maybe 10 times, I'll think that that's probably something that you really want answered, and I'll try to get that going. And just before that, let me just get the startups to introduce themselves. What better way, to get to know them and for them to introduce themselves. So we'll start from Zaki.
So my name is Zaki, and I run a company called Game Ventures. We build games for Facebook. We've got two. We do sports titles. We've got one around cricket and another one coming up around baseball. And our proudest stat is that every day we are responsible for about 3 years of lost productivity, man-hours wise. That's what we do.
Thanks, Zaki. And then next we have Alvin from TMG.
Yeah, so Melvin from TMG, the dog is the mobile gamer. We basically do mobile social gaming for emerging markets. So like Southeast Asia, India, we're about 2.5, 2.6 million users today, and still growing very fast. So more on the gaming side of things.
Right. And Sanjay from Replay.
My name is Sanjay and I'm from Replay. So we are more well known for our Saman Auntie app, which is very local.
Saman Auntie, right?
For now.
Saman Auntie.
Okay. So what we do is we develop mobile apps for clients as well as in-house programs for the fun of it.
Right. And from Chalkboard, we're supposed to have Samuel, but Bernard is standing in for something today, right, Bernard?
Hi everybody, I'm Bernard, co-founder of Chalkboard. Chalkboard is basically doing location-based advertising for groups of people. The first group is small and medium businesses, and the other group is for the brands. I'm currently standing in, and also thank the organizers for inviting us down.
Thank you guys. So right off the bat, let's talk about the challenges that you face. We're supposed to talk about the good and the bad of starting up in Singapore, but I thought we just look at what are the bad stuff starting up in Singapore. Let's talk about the challenges. What are some of the challenges you face as entrepreneurs starting up in Singapore? Anybody? Alvin?
As we were preparing early on, I think some of the key points that came up was small market. So if you're a startup trying to tackle the domestic market, it is really hardly enough. You have to be global, which is actually not a bad thing to look at it, but you have to be global or regional from day one. Otherwise, very difficult to scale. I think for me, it's a general lack of interest in starting up, general lack of interest from people to work in startups. So hiring people is not so easy in Singapore if you're a startup. Just acquiring the talent is a big problem.
Okay, hiring people is an issue, and market size is an issue. Anybody else?
I feel like when people say that small market or small domestic market, that's a problem. It's not so much a small domestic market.
Let me see that.
Certain kinds of companies, you're not near where your ideal customer base is. I think it's more important to be near your customer base. And if you're a web company, you need to be near your customers, because otherwise you wouldn't know what kind of things they would say or use. And in business to business sense, venture, you need to also know your customers just so that you're always on their minds. And that's especially startups over here generally trying to target Western audiences or trying to monetize Western audiences, and we're one of them. They tend to not be very near their customers, so one of the pitfalls is that you need to make sure that you try to always keep one foot where your customers are, and that's something that I think is
Right.
I think the market issue is a relevant one, but since we are able to converse in English and language, it gives us instant access to two of the largest markets in the world. It's not really a big problem, it's just that local startups have to have the balls to just go overseas and station there. You can't possibly station in Singapore and say you want to go to, let's say, US and start a company. So it's a little bit different if you're going to work with as what Zain has said, you need to really be close to your customers. And of course, hiring is always a problem because whenever you want to hire Singaporeans, especially, they will go and get grants and start their own company.
Yeah, I sort of brought up this point of hiring. So the startups, they're actually facing two crunches. The first crunch is the hiring of talent, where you're actually in competition with the bigger companies. I'm pretty sure most of the startups have the same problem, is that you want to hire a very talented engineer, but Google and Facebook can really double the price of it. So that's the first part. And you have no choice but to hire foreigners. So what happens is that it's very tough to actually get employment passes because your employment passes, even if you're a high-tech company, you want to hire somebody who's really talented, it's really tough. So they are being classified the same as those factory workers, construction workers. So it's actually very tough to hire foreign talent. So it is this interesting crunch that I actually observed running a startup. The second part, I think, regarding the market size, it's actually a pretty interesting problem, but it's also a good advantage is that you expand from the very first day. The problem is that when you try to raise Series A round, and your key market is not Singapore, and what usually VCs will ask you is the following, but no Singapore VCs are funding you, right? So how would we be convinced even if we want to go to India and we can fund you? I don't know it. Yeah.
Okay, so all right.
The thing about being Singapore, I think one of the key things for me is that I don't see enough startups. I think really looking at markets that are between 2 to 4 hours away from them. So that's just me, but I think Singapore startups trying to target US is impractical, will not work. Because you're targeting a market that is 14, 16 hours away, right? When you're awake, you're sleeping, you have no idea what they're up to. When you do something interesting, some other startup over there is going to copy you and kill you in 2 weeks, right? So it's simply not practical unless you're willing to move over there, right? But we're 2 to 4 hours away from some of the biggest markets in the world that everybody's looking at: India, China, Indonesia. Right? I don't see enough startups sort of looking at those markets. It is difficult, yes, but I mean nothing easy, nothing big is easy, right? So definitely there's some difficulty inside.
Right, they can't hear you. Let's start from the top, right?
So introduction.
Okay, go on, yeah.
Yeah. Test. Yeah, so I was saying, I think startups in Singapore should focus more on the markets that's between 2 to 4 hours away, because they're a lot closer to them. Relocating to those places is not as difficult as relocating to the US, or to somewhere to Europe, for instance. So I think the education system and everything in Singapore makes it such that the first thing we look at is the big US market, right? But I mean, good luck, right? Or the next China market. China market is relatively easier, but still, as Sanjay has mentioned, you can't expect to do that unless you're willing to move over there, have a setup over there, and just commit to it.
Right, I'd like to add something. I sort of disagree. I feel that instead of trying to limit your ambition, just from a macro point of view, instead of trying to limit your ambition, say look at markets 2 hours away, 3 hours away. I think the geography of Singapore is such and the demographic makeup is such that it's always been a very globalized place, and it's getting more so, right? I've been here 7 years and I've seen it get even more globalized as time has gone by. So instead of trying to limit yourself, you need to understand, look, there are markets near and there are markets far, and Singapore is a very interesting place in which there are people from all around the world, and what's more, you can attract people from all around the world to move here, and it's much easier, even though, as Bernard said, there are employment cost problems and so on. It's still relatively easy compared to other markets. And whatever market you target, whether it's near or far, I would imagine that you need to get even more ambitious. So why not, if your market happens to be America? I mean, we're launching a baseball game, right? And that's the US and Japan. You need to level your game up to there and say, okay, we're going to put 1 foot over there. We're going to hire some Americans. We're going to have some Japanese people, bring them to Singapore. We're going to work with people over there as well, and just employ a much more globalized outlook than, say, a startup in Silicon Valley, which is to go down the road to find 5 copycats and more talent. I think that's different.
I think the question is not because people want to go to the US or to China. In fact, I agree with Saki, actually. agree with Alvin. The problem is not going, I mean, the 2 to 4 hour markets are okay? I mean, it's good to get revenues from the nearby markets, but the problem is the following. If you think about, let's say you are doing pretty well in Malaysia, for example, okay? The exchange rate is 1 Singapore dollar to 2.5 RM, okay? And that question is that if you're running a 1 million revenue from just RM and you're running a Singapore team, the cost would actually go higher. So sometimes companies decided to go to the US as more of a strategic choice where the actual customers can actually help to sustain the growth rate of the company as well. And also the other thing is that probably I would say that not many Southeast Asian companies actually have very good exits, and it requires a really major market access to do that. And there are only what I call the BRIC markets. So it's Brazil, Russia, India, and China. Maybe Indonesia now is the new eye on that. So because of that, sometimes companies have to take strategic choices. The strategic choices may be wrong, but the thinking is that you just have to be more ambitious. That's what we think about it.
Okay, I don't see any questions coming in from Twitter. Maybe I'm slow over here, but I'll just go on. I hear a few things here about proximity to market, market issues, hiring, being an issue, or maybe not being an issue if you can hire more people from overseas and stuff like that. So maybe for now, just focus a bit more on local. So in Singapore, a lot of the entrepreneurs get a lot of help from government and grants and all that. So what's your thoughts on that? Do you think the government is doing too little, or is the government doing too much? Anybody? Something?
I think we from Replit are funded by Spring Singapore, so I think I'm in a better position.
Disclaimer there, okay?
Talk about it. I think that the Singapore giving out grant is a very good concept, and it happens probably only in Singapore, and I don't really see it in Asian countries around us. And is it giving too little or too much? I think the answer and the question is, it shouldn't be, is it too little or too much? It should be whether these funds are given to the right people. I mean, I have seen cases where, as a founder, I start a company, okay, and I hire a few Singaporeans. So when they have an idea, what they'll do is they just go away and go and get their own grants. So it creates a talent crunch, in my point of view. So what the government is basically doing is actually diversifying their funds and creating unnecessary competition. What they should do, I feel, is to at least qualify the people and have a better selection process instead of just having an innovative idea, one that might or might not be profitable.
Okay, so disclosure 2, I'm under the NRF EIS grant, Chopra is funded by that, so that's first, through Mutiny Labs. So I think the question, the intention of the government giving out grants to entrepreneurs is good, okay? So we do not question the intention. The implementation is the challenging part, and we can't fault the government because there's a lot of accountability. After all, it's taxpayers' money. Not just in Singapore, I know in Malaysia they have MDEC, MAVCAP. I think Indonesia is now starting their own government-based fund to fund entrepreneurs as well. But I think the question is that when an entrepreneur starts heavily dependent on the grant itself, it's what we call grant entrepreneurs. And I think that's not a good phenomenon to have. Why? Because if you were to think about it from this point, if you continuously going grant after grant, you're not actually building value. So sometimes it's actually, from even in my own personal perspective, even if you take government money, if it fails, you better off let it fail. Because it is not, I think what is really the worry is whether they are more forgiving to failures, that's one. And the second thing is to know when they should stop. When the startup should stop, instead of just let them becoming like a zombie company running over for the next couple of years, going nowhere. I think a lot of, this is partially the problem in the local scene that we're not seeing a high refresh rate of new startups coming in.
I think that's more a problem with the fear of failure, I believe, here, as opposed to just the probability of people to get grants and so on. People don't want to admit failure. But you're right, I mean, as an entrepreneur, we have government investors or quasi-government investors, and so obviously I wouldn't say it's a bad thing necessarily. I don't like it anymore now that we're hiring and we're in the hiring market. But there was a time where I did like it a lot, so I think it's fair. Just that, as you mentioned, there is a survival of the fittest, an evolution when it comes to starting new companies, and it's okay to fail and let companies fail, so that people who learn something with that money, and there are always people in the failed startup who learned a lot. They come in and join successful startups and help those guys level up, or go start another company and then another company, because that's essentially how an ecosystem develops. That's the one pitfall. I think sometimes companies that should by right be failing are not failing because they can become, they have access to money which by right should not be money that they should be getting. So it's unhealthy for everybody at some level, but yeah.
Anything to add, Abdul?
So we've also been funded by Spring and MBA. We've also raised private financing before from investors, from strategy investors. So I think I sort of agree. I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I think it's a really good thing. I mean, it's a known fact that in Singapore the tech ecosystem is still maturing, it's still growing. It's been around for maybe just a couple of years. Still a long way to go before we're anywhere near what Silicon Valley has. Right, so there's this big lack of investors, this big lack of qualified investors, so to say, right? So naturally you have this crunch of money. Without this money, it's difficult for startups to begin, it's difficult for startups to scale. So I think having the government come in to bridge this gap is a good thing, right? If you're a startup out there, you're looking to get government fund, I say go for it, because if you don't, some lesser startup will get it anyway. So don't waste the money. But it of course makes hiring difficult because so many, maybe substandard ideas get funded as well. So they tend to come into the job market and they take away talent and things like that. I think there's a lot of discussion around whether or not it is worth it or not, whether so many startups should be funded. Yeah, I think that's a little bit too. I think to put it into perspective, I don't think we will see the results of all these schemes in the near future, right? Because for me personally, at least, the government funds did not come to help me grow my business. It came to help me and my team grow as entrepreneurs, grow as people who run the business. Because reality is that I personally think it's virtually impossible to teach people how to run a business. The only way to do that is to let them get out, get their ass kicked, and they will learn, right? So getting them government funding is a good way to do that because it's like tuition fee. So if we take a step back and look at it, hey, these guys, a couple of years down the road, after the learning experience they have from these funds, they're going to be raising their own money, building a better company, then you will see the results. So I think we've got to take a step back and sort of see it in a macro perspective. I think it's a great thing.
I like how you say it. Here's 50,000, go get your ass kicked, right? Okay.
But
yeah.
I've seen a lot of people who've taken that $50,000 grant and then not gone out there and tried as hard as they could. I mean, when the money dried up, they just went home and went and got an MBA or something. So that's the danger there, right? At that level. I mean, when you're getting funds at a much higher level, say you're raising 6 figures or more, and the government, through one of its investment arms, is investing, then you have very qualified investment professionals who look at your case, and then it's great. But at the lower level, since there's so many startups they want to fund or that can possibly get funded, I believe there's something like 500. I think there's a new scheme out that we're going to fund 500 startups over the course of a year or two. It's hard to maintain quality control, especially when you're on an island of 5-6 million people, right? So I feel that as long as they're getting their ass kicked with that money, and that's great, then you're actually getting people who will eventually amount to something. But if you're just, if it's something that you're going to create an iPad app with, it's a fun game, and once the money dries up, you go and get an MBA or something, then maybe that's not the right.
This old saying that it's harder to give money away than to take money, right? I think that's maybe where sometimes the issue of giving money to startups. So starting off with a good idea, wanting to support the ecosystem and jumpstart things, but it's so hard to give money away. And sometimes you cannot, once you give money away, because it's taxpayers' money, so you can't afford for them to fail, as you say. But in startups, it's better to fail fast, fail early, is what you're saying. And so just staying on the local scene now. Now, since we talked about Singapore market size being an issue, and it's a small market, but how do you actually survive in Singapore? Let's say, I know, like, for example, Sanjay's startup Replay, you guys did a very localized mobile app, and how do you actually, do you have some stuff to share, some experience to share, not just Sanjay, but everyone, about just surviving and doing well, just looking at the local market before we look at the other markets. Yeah.
I must first add that Samanandi was not the idea that we approached Spring Singapore for, because they'll probably reject it. So Samanandi is just a pet project that we try to do. We have ideas and we try to develop it in-house. But to put real food on the table, we develop projects for clients. So I still think that if you are going to just focus on Singapore, that's really a very bad choice, because Samanandi has a lot of media coverage, and up to date we only have about 200,000 downloads. Imagine if you're going to charge $1 for this, it's going to half the downloads, and you get only like $100,000. And to start a business in Singapore to survive with the overheads that we have here, it's going to last us less than 6 months. So I still think that you should always have cash flow before you do any business. Don't just go for a grant with an idea, and once the idea dries out, you have no more business, and there's nothing else you can do.
What about you, Bernard? Like you guys, Shopboard, you started off with closing in on local retailers and all that.
So our challenge is slightly different. So the question is more of skill, and I guess the first thing that we focus on was to use Singapore more as a trial market and test customers. So we did about 500 to 1,000 customers, and then subsequently grow to about 2,000 customers. But the real skill comes when you go to a market that you can actually scale. That means you're talking of an order of magnitude. That's like 10,000. 10,000 businesses, or like this in KL, or something like 100,000 businesses in Indonesia. Then scaling becomes a challenge. Okay? I think the things that we looked at, the way we looked at it is that we always treat Singapore as a test market. So we don't really focus that much, but we think a lot about how do we get more traction in another market where there's the skill is involved, because that's how you're going to live and die by it, because you need to build out a sustainable business.
Anything to add?
Yeah, so it's the way I see it, right? The thing is that, so if you go out, like we talk about going global and stuff like that, if you go out often enough, you very soon realize that a lot of people don't even think Singapore is a country, right? You're amazed at the amount of people that tell you, hey, Singapore, is that like a city of China or Malaysia? Part of China, right? So reality check. You and I, nobody gives a shit, right? To get there, to compete in the US market, in the China market, you need to be somebody first. And Singapore gives you that chance, right? You have a 4 million population, maybe 80% smartphone penetration. You can be number one somewhere relatively quick if you focus on that, right? Say for instance, you can be the number one, summer app in Singapore. When you go out to meet people, that gives you a story like, oh, I'm number one somewhere, at least you're number one somewhere. But it's extremely difficult to be number one anywhere. So being in Singapore gives you that advantage, but you got to focus, you got to know what your market is like, what is the consumer preferences and everything. As Lucky has mentioned, you got to be so close to your customers, right? Know who they are, know what they are, know what they like to you. Be number one somewhere fairly soon. That helps you go global. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to get any bit of attention on what you do. So, I mean, if you want to focus on Singapore, focus on something you can be number one relatively.
Good points raised. So build a base here, get some credibility before you go out and go to the Wild West and get your ass kicked, right? So I have some questions here from the floor. So let me try to see if we can take some of these. So first question from Kira, I think. Is the culture here supportive of startups, or is it still very conservative, risk and failure averse? Anyone?
Depends on who you ask, okay? If it's your immediate family or relatives, then yes, risk is a problem. So the question I get is...
Bernard knows best. He has hard time with his in-laws, right?
No. Actually, my in-laws are very supportive because they're entrepreneurs. So let me clarify that first, okay? I think this is very important if you... Well, here's a side note since I'm getting married in 2 weeks' time. It's always good to find someone with family or entrepreneurs because they tend to be very understanding.
That's a good tip, right?
Okay? Anyway,
you heard it here on Startup.
But I think the question is more of the communities. I think communities have to be more supportive. So I think all of us probably come from the same community. You know the same people from Pan-Olsen, from E27, SG Entrepreneurs, all the, whoever, every activity we keep meeting each other up. The question is not about meeting up all the time. I think the question up is sort of bounce ideas between each other and be in supporting to each other, including the Hackerspace Singapore, where sometimes some of us can get into bumps and then we can go there and talk to people, etc. So that's the first support group we must have. The second support group you need to have is like mentors, people who might have done it before and succeed. So that's the other thing. Because you have to deal with a lot of pressure, okay? The pressure is not with you as the entrepreneur because you like what you're doing. The pressure is with all your friends who are earning like, god-like salaries, bank salaries, and then you need to deal with that type of peer pressure. So I think that's a cultural problem. That cultural problem will never change. So if you're in a startup business, as I always say, you just have to suck it up and just deal with it. Because you're paying for what you like to do versus what you don't like to do and get paid very well. Yeah.
Okay, there's a question here from Bernard. 2,000 corporate clients or users?
2,000 merchant local businesses.
Local businesses, right? Okay, I have a question here for Alvin, I think. Okay, I'll skip that first. I'll ask a more general question because that's something I want to ask, like, for everyone later. Okay, this is something about CSR. So, at which point does a startup start to consider its influence on society? Corporate social responsibility, right? So, at which point does a startup start to consider your responsibility, your influence on society? Is CSR something that you consider at all?
I think you got to consider it only when you start making money. And it's no use if you consider CSR and you can't survive for the next month.
Right, okay, so this question is for Alvin. So, if you were to go back in time, what would you do differently?
It's like a tough one. Anyway, on CSR is the last thing on my mind because there's so many other things that can kill you, right? So yeah, not CSR. Don't think about it yet, right? So for go back in time, like that's like the question you ask yourself every day, and there's always an answer for that. Because I think being in the startup space, running a company, if you're not learning something every day, not going out getting your ass kicked, as like has mentioned, then you're probably not doing the right thing, right? Because you should be, if you're not going where you want to, you're not getting 100% growth, you're not getting your 2x revenue, then you should be trying something new every day, right? So that is something that when we look back in time, yesterday I would have wanted to do something differently because it maybe helps me close the deal 5 days faster, right? Or it maybe helps me get the app out 2 days faster if I didn't make that engineering mistake and stuff like that. So that's a tough one to answer, but I think every day you learn something, and every day there's a new answer to that question.
Anything to add to this, guys?
Well, I think, I have to reiterate there. I mean, speed is something that I wish that I'd move faster with too. I mean, if you look back, everybody thinks, hey, you guys are doing so well, and you guys are launching all these new things and so on, but you know that you could have moved faster last year, and then the year before that you could have moved faster. So as you sort of gain experience as an entrepreneur, you tend to sort of wonder why you didn't do all the stuff that you should have done back in the day, and your excuse probably at that time was, hey, I don't have any time. So I think it's a function of delegation, learning to delegate, and you learn to do that as you sort of get more experience. But that's the number one tip for every new entrepreneur out there. Just learn to delegate, learn to move as fast as you can, and 50% of decisions you make are going to be wrong anyway. So be very comfortable making wrong decisions.
I sort of want to add to Zaki's point. I think every time when I think about people say that it's successful, I'm actually very scared because I think there's a lot of when things are going the upslide, you have to be prepared that you can also go down as well. So I think that's something that always keep on the back of our mind, like what we didn't do well when even if there's success happening, you just have to say, okay, what are the things that we haven't done well, and just continue to execute. I think execution is pretty important in any startup, whether in whichever field you are doing.
So we don't have that much time left, and we're given the cue to wrap soon. I'll just take this one last question from the floor. I'm sorry if some of you have questions that can't be answered, but I thought this question was interesting before we wrap. So, if you have your own funds to invest, how would you qualify the startups to invest in? How would you qualify the startups that you want to invest in?
It's actually an interesting question. It depends on how much funds you have, right? I mean, if you're investing at a very basic seed level, or if you're just putting $20,000-$30,000 into companies, then what you generally hear, and what I think is very true, is you're not really investing in an idea, you're investing in people who bring the idea to you. So you look at them, you have a bunch of things. Everybody has their own list, and I probably look at how tenacious they are, and if they're people I can trust and have integrity. Those are the main ones there. I mean, if they keep trying, that helps. And a little bit of experience will help too. I mean, if you're going to be going out there and building a product that's going to make money, then you're probably going to succeed if you build products in the past, any kind of products. I don't care if it's an app that didn't make any money, if you have any kind of traction at all at some point, then you're probably going to want, you probably have the experience it takes to build something bigger. So that's one of the key things I would say.
So, right, it's a lot of stuff, right? But I think, you know, put it down to like 3 things. I think number 1, gotta be a big market. Number 2 is gotta be a crazy ass founder, somebody that you know is gonna make it work, right? Tenacity, I think, is the most important thing. To me, that's worth more than experience, worth more than anything, because you know this guy is gonna knock down walls just to get it done. Right? You need that type of guy. And I think the last thing is just the ability to be laser focused on getting traction. Right? Because traction is just so damn difficult to get. So you need people that are not going to tell you and come in, so I'm going to dominate this $50 billion market. That's bullshit. You need people that can come in and say, I'm going to get to this amount of revenue, I'm going to nail this customer in the next 3 months. And that's going to be the base for me to get to somewhere, right? Somebody that can give you realistic, executable steps like that. Right? I think that for me is very valuable.
The question was whether I would invest in some of these companies or
how would you qualify someone? Yeah.
For me, it would always have to be that the business is able to generate cash flow from day one as an investor. I mean, as a founder, of course, I know it's very tough, but if I'm investing, I would prefer that the company has already cash flow and it acts as a very safe buffer for me.
So I'm a bit lucky. Before I was doing Chopper, I was an early stage investor, so I left with 2 exits. And that was how I thought about when I was doing investments. So the first thing I'm looking for is the idea and the team. The team actually takes more precedence than the idea. Because in the 10 I did, 2 of them were very successful. One of them got sold, it's iHypo, and the founder went on to do greater things. He went to do deals.com.sg and deals.com.my. The other one was Lunch actually, they went on to Series A funding. I think the key thing that really makes very important for a company to be investable is the founders, how well they execute. Just to give you a data point, whenever I meet the Lunch Actually CEO as an investor, he has everything ready. No matter how much questions I ask him about, have you looked at this part of the product, this is what your competitors, he's very well prepared. And that's the type of what Alvin was mentioning about laser focus. This is where I'm going to be, this is how it's going to be, what advice do you have for me? It's challenging for the investor, but I enjoy actually working with them on that. And I felt that their success, the way I see it, is because they are laser sharp in executing. Yeah.
Right. I apologize, we're out of time. So I know there's some questions about hiring programmers, some about finding good mentors. Maybe Joey and Kingsley, you can grab them after the break or something like that. I just want to wrap with this, and each of you can just give us your parting shot and tell us something good about starting up in Singapore. We talked a lot about the not so good stuff and all that, but give us a parting shot on why it's so great to start up in Singapore.
Well, I think Singapore has a well-earned reputation as being the easiest place in the world to do business. I mean, we don't worry about, your CPF is easy, paying taxes are easy, everything that you need done by the government is so quick. I mean, the government is actually on your side, which as an entrepreneur is an amazing feeling, because whenever I meet friends of mine who are starting up in the States, they've got to file taxes in 30 out of 50 states independently, and then they've got all sorts of archaic rules and stuff that we worry about, and that's a big overhead, not just a cost overhead, but also a time overhead and a stress overhead, and we don't worry about any of those. It's like, it's almost, it's perfect for entrepreneurs to start up in that respect.
I mean, right, you're Singaporean, then starting up in Singapore means you're at home, right? I mean, nothing beats that. So, but if you're not from Singapore or for non-being at home purposes, I think Zaki has mentioned, the very fact the government is on your side, it makes administration so easy. There's a reason why so many MNCs want to start in Singapore, because it's just a lot easier to do that. And I think being in Singapore gives you 2 major advantages. I mean, one of the key advantages I see is that you get people that can go global fairly easily if they want to. Because you have people here that speak Mandarin and English. That covers US markets, European markets a little bit, and it covers the Chinese market. Right? It's easier to go to places like Korea, Japan, if you're actually Singaporean, right? And in Southeast Asia, Singapore has this, it's different standing, right? When you go to Indonesia, you go from Malaysia, you're from Singapore, you have actually some advantages compared to Singapore going to the Valley or Singapore going to Africa, right? So I think it definitely helps in going global.
So I think Singapore is very efficient, and of course the best part is the food. And I see someone on Teams as well, very efficient. Or I get someone every day almost.
Well, everything they have said. One thing I would like to say is that no matter what type of complaints we have on some government agencies, whenever things happen, usually we have very good support. The government is always on our side. Let me just tell you that whenever we have some trouble, even with MOM, our NRF will help, IDA will help, MDA will help. Okay, so it's just a matter of just trying to bypass those bureaucratic issues that whatever. On the whole, it's very easy to set up. I actually take less than 15 minutes to get everything done online. So I think if you want to start up, this is the best place to be.
Thank you guys, I really had fun with this panel. Thank you very much. Give it up for the hot setups over here.
Nicely done, guys. Zaki from Game Ventures, Alvin TMG, Sanjay from Replayed, Bernard from Chalkboard, and excellent moderation. Thank you very much, Nicholas. Thank you, guys. We're going to be switching out here. Right down the middle. Thanks very much. We have 2 more fireside chats coming up, or I guess here in Singapore, you can probably call it a air-conditioned chat, or